John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have a life and have it to the full. Other translations would say that I came to give you life and life more abundantly. Jesus makes it really clear all throughout his time on earth, throughout the New Testament, that he came not just so that we would have life, but that we would have life that's better, that's elevated, that's more. And a lot of times we get stuck in what we think is best, that we forget that God's good is better than our good. I don't know if you've ever felt like this, but like sometimes it feels like following God is super boring. Following God, you don't get to do any of the fun stuff in the world. You don't get to do any of the cool stuff. It's like you just do all of these things. Don't do this, and it's like boring, boring, boring. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. I have definitely felt like that in seasons of life. And sometimes it feels like God only exists to kill all of the joy and fun in my life. But here's the thing, is that we have to look at this with a different perspective. When I was young, credit cards weren't really a thing, but when I was growing up, anytime I would go to the store with my mom or with my dad, I would find something that I wanted, a toy, whatever it was, and then when we would get out to the checkout stand, I would say the same thing. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so this rarely ever worked, but we would get out to the checkout stand, and then I would put it on the conveyor belt, and my mom or dad would go, Cameron, we can't afford that, you can't buy it. And I would say the same thing. I would say, Mom, Dad, just write a check. I didn't know what a checkbook was. I just knew that when you pulled out this little pad of paper, you fill it out and you hand it to the person, and then they give you anything that you want. That was how I understood it, right? Today, it's a credit card. Can't afford it? Pull out your credit card, right? Swipe, swipe, swipe. And there's this freedom with that. Like, I don't have the money right now, but I can still buy something. I can still afford everything, even though really I can afford nothing. And so that was my motto growing up. Just write a check, right? That feels like freedom. If I want something that I have not budgeted for, that I can't afford, what do? I pull out my credit card, and it feels like freedom. Like I can do what I want, when I want, I can get what I want. Here's the problem, is that when you live life without a budget, when you live life without any guardrails, that freedom will eventually lead to slavery. Because what felt like freedom when you were just swiping that credit card, when you were writing those checks, eventually that balance comes due. And if you couldn't afford it then, you won't be able to afford it now. And so this freedom, this feeling of freedom that you've lived your life with has actually led you into slavery, because now I have this balance due that I can't pay. When really, when God says that I have come to give life and life more abundantly, he's saying, here's a way that you should live your life. And if you live your life this way, what he's saying is, if you live your life with a budget, guess what? It leads to financial freedom. If you live your life with a moral code and structure, guess what? It leads to moral freedom. If you live your life according to God's word, it doesn't lead to boredom. It doesn't lead to slavery. It leads to freedom. In fact, David in the Psalms write this, Psalm 119:6, I will delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. And this is coming from a guy who messed up maybe more than anybody, and certainly more publicly. David understood that the rules and the laws that God had laid down, it wasn't to steal joy from us. It was to give us more joy. It was to lead us into life more abundantly. So I have come to love God's word, and my prayer is that all of us would see God's word as not something that takes joy away, but gives life more abundantly. Choose God, choose God's word.